Monthly Politics Update, May edition. So, this is going to be the first video of a new series of videos on my YouTube channel. I will be uploading one politics video a month covering roughly the previous month's big news stories. Of course, there's always going to be more news than I can fit in one 10 to 20 minute video, so I'm just going to hit the major talking points or some of the major stories. I received a lot of good feedback on the politics videos I did during the election. Now, I'm not going to be doing the same exact style since not every single video is going to have national polling results because it doesn't really matter right now. So, for example, this one, there is a little bit of polling in here, but it is not polling heavy. It is entirely based on the news stories and what has happened in the past month to get you caught up. So let us start with the post-election update. As you can see from Elections Canada's website, the final vote totals are a bit different than they were on election night, on the election night video that I did. Now, why is that? Well, a lot of ridings were really close. So, there were a bunch of recounts. That flipped a few ridings. The most notable was Terrebonne. Terrebonne is a block riding in Montreal, in the northwest of Montreal, off of the island. So on election night, Terrebonne was called for the Liberals. After vote validation by all of the scrutineers of the varying parties that had candidates in the riding, it flipped to the Bloc. But then, after a judicial recount was ordered because the count was way too close, it flipped back to the Liberals by a single vote, by one single vote. So, that was it. It was going to be just a crazy close riding, but then some news stories started to pop up. A woman in Terrebonne said she voted for the Bloc and her ballot wasn't counted. And the reason her ballot wasn't counted is because the special ballot that she voted with, which is the early ballot, not any of the overseas ones, not any of the voting in person early ballots. These are special ballots that you can order in your riding for residents in the riding to vote very early. She voted for the Bloc Québécois, and her ballot didn't count because the return address on it was not correct, meaning Elections Canada screwed up. So after a bunch of back and forth, Elections Canada said they are not going to change the result despite the ballot issue. The Bloc promised to sue Elections Canada to nullify the vote because there were too many errors in the voting process, and therefore a by-election should be held. Now, it's worth noting, she wasn't the only one. There were a dozen or so, I can't remember the exact number, people who had the same issue, who voted legally and their ballots were not counted. And because it was so close, this has to result in a by-election, in my opinion. The Bloc has filed a legal challenge to have a by-election held. We will have to wait and see for the result of it. I'm guessing there will be a by-election held simply because this is a very close riding and the screw-up was not from any of the voters, it was from Elections Canada themselves. So I would expect a by-election. What does this mean for the Parliament? It doesn't really mean much. The Liberals are sitting at 169. This is with Terrebonne in their favor. So if they lose the riding in a by-election, they drop to 168. If they win it again, they stay the same. Not much has really changed in terms of who controls Parliament or anything like that. But it is still a very big news story, and not the only news story with ridings flipping. Just yesterday, finally, this is ridiculous that it took this long, the riding of Terra Nova flipped from Liberal to Conservative after a judicial recount. So the Conservatives won it by just 12 votes, meaning the Conservatives jumped up to 144. Again, this doesn't have much of an impact on parliamentary process, but it is noteworthy and also ridiculous that this took this long to get through. There were a couple others at judicial recounts that didn't change anything. None of it was one of them. And there were a few others, but I can't remember because they don't really matter since they didn't change anything. Now, moving past the election, I made a community post about this. You can read it if you want. Essentially, one of the members of Parliament that got elected in this past election, specifically of Battle River Crowfoot, which is a rural riding in Alberta, he's going to give up his seat and Pierre is going to run in the by-election in his stead. Now, this was not a power move by Pierre. The candidate that gave up his seat willingly gave it up, Damien Kurek. There was, of the 29 comments that I got on this community post, there was a lot of people saying this is great, this is awful, he should resign. Honestly, I think this is probably the best outcome. Pierre is a fantastic opposition leader. If you don't think he's a good prime minister candidate, I can understand. I disagree, but I can understand. You want Pierre in the House. And I guarantee you, Damien Kurek is going to get a very cushy job within the Conservative Party, and he'll just run here again in the next election, whenever that is. Now, in terms of a timeline, what can you expect for Pierre getting into the House of Commons again? Well, the by-election is going to be held probably sometime in August. Carney has promised to hold it as soon as possible, but he can't actually call it until a bunch of bureaucratic steps have been taken before that. So it'll likely be held in August, and Pierre will be in Parliament in the fall session, which is starts, I believe, at the end of September. In the meantime, Andrew Scheer will be the opposition leader. I called this before it was officially given, and it's pretty obvious. Scheer has been a big supporter of Pierre, and he has had the job in the past, so he knows how to do it, and it's only going to be 2 to 4 weeks. Now, speaking of parliamentary leaders, we have the NDP. Singh stepped down on election night, and there will be an NDP leadership race coming up soon-ish. There are a couple people that have put their name in the hats, but no one serious. However, in the meantime, Carney said that he is not going to have a governing pact with the NDP, so there's not going to be the supply and confidence agreement that Trudeau had with Singh. Now, while there's going to be no official pact, until the NDP has an official leader, there's not going to be any election call. Now, while the NDP is setting up their leadership race, things are not going well within the caucus. Don Davies was named the interim leader, and this did not go over well with several members. Winnipeg MP Leah Gazan, Nunavut MP Lori, I don't know, Indlout, I don't know how to pronounce her name, I'm sorry, and Vancouver East MP Jenny Kwan. They were not happy with Don Davies' appointment, and that's because they weren't told. They found out that Don Davies was the interim NDP leader on Twitter. So I think this NDP leadership race is going to be set up with two main camps. You're going to have the camp that is in favor of Singh's approach of trying to get everything out of the Liberals that they can get. And then you're going to have the other camp that is trying to push back against Singh's approach and create a strong NDP. Who will win? I don't know. The NDP is very fractured right now in terms of that these camps, right? This is essentially, these three MPs are basically half of their MPs, so half the caucus is split. However, it is worth noting that none of the NDP members on either side have expressed willingness to cross the floor. A majority for Carney is extremely unlikely with floor crossing. And if anything, I would actually expect Liberals to cross over to the NDP because Carney so far has proven to be more center-right, and I think the left-wing part of the Liberal caucus is going to be rather unhappy in the coming months. That moves us along to Carney news. Marco Mendicino, who was Carney's chief of staff for some inexplicable reason, is stepping down and he's going to leave that job. It's rumored that Mendicino is going to run for Toronto mayor, so good luck, Toronto. Your choices are Mendicino and Olivia Chow. Have fun with that. In the meantime, Carney's chief of staff, Mendicino, is still kind of operating as it until they find a replacement. Apparently, they can't really find a replacement very well. We don't know exactly what's going to happen here, who this new chief of staff is going to be. I suspect it's going to be someone who Carney very much trusts, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're an outsider. The chief of staff does a lot of political wrangling in Ottawa, and I think Carney is going to want someone who he knows, one, he can trust, but also who he can rely on for advice. Speaking of people Carney can trust around him, he elected his new cabinet, and oh boy, is it a dumpster fire. There are a lot of Trudeau-era MPs in very important roles. Champagne as finance minister, Anand as foreign affairs minister, Sean Fraser, for some inexplicable reason, is in the cabinet. Chrystia Freeland is still in it. Guilbeault is still in it. Patty Haiju is somehow still in this cabinet, or making a return to this cabinet, I should say. This cabinet is an absolute disaster. You can read through it if you want. In terms of gun owners, there is one important name for us. Actually, there's a couple important names, I should say. Number one is this guy, Gary. I'm not going to pronounce your last name. He's the Minister of Public Safety. Now, I made a community post about this as well. Now, he is a bit of an interesting character. He still has the liberal anti-gun policy BS that they spew, but he never went the extra mile. He's never constantly retweeting Polly or asking for more gun control. He kind of was just there. Like the gun control stuff he did was because it was part of the Liberal Party. So what does this mean for gun owners? Well, you can go watch the What Does a Carney Liberal Minority Government Mean for Gun Owners? That video goes over a bunch of different scenarios, but I will say the most extreme stuff of like feature bans and flat 5-round magazine bans are very unlikely to happen now. And part of the reason for that is because the people that are like the most extreme anti-gun homophobes in the government right now in MP positions are not anywhere near the gun file. Brendian and Blair are out of cabinet, and Provost, while she's in cabinet, she's a Secretary of State and in nature. She has absolutely nothing to do with guns, and if you're wondering about hunting stuff, that is provincial jurisdiction. So there's not a lot that Provost can do or even influence regarding guns, and the people that are involved with guns, which is also another Secretary of State, Ruby Sahota, she also hasn't posted anything outside of the normal Liberal anti-gun BS. So I think we're looking at something closer to the Trudeau majority gun control era, which was still bad, but it's less bad than, you know, the Blair and Mendocino era. But like I always say, if there is any major update for gun owners with any political bills or whatever, you can expect a video from me. I will get it through as fast as I can whenever announcements are made. Now, the Conservatives have also released their Shadow Cabinet team, and there was a lot of pushback of why are there so many people in the Shadow Cabinet? Well, the Shadow Cabinet doesn't actually get paid more. Shadow ministers and whatever, they don't get paid more. They don't have ministries where they have to control all these staffers. These are essentially critics of the different things that the government will be doing. So for example, there's no minister for red tape reduction, right? So the shadow minister for red tape reduction is essentially just the critic on that specific topic. That's the person you can expect to stand in Parliament and say, I don't like this, this, or this, and they'll sit down after they're done with that specific problem that they have. But if someone is, say, going to comment on foreign affairs, Michael Chong will be the one to stand up in Parliament and talk about it. That's not to say these people aren't important. For each of the issues that they criticize, they are heavily involved in the communities. For example, the previous public safety shadow critic or shadow minister was Raquel Dancho, and every single gun owner I've ever talked to absolutely loved this woman. She was a fantastic shadow minister. She did the best that she could in all of the the parliamentary committees, and she connected with the community a lot. Now, sadly, she's not on public safety anymore. She is now Shadow Ministry for Industry, which, good for her. And in her letter announcing this, she also included a message to gun owners. She says, I was proud to fight for you and work tirelessly against the Liberals' deeply flawed and divisive gun confiscation regime, one that targets Canada's law-abiding hunters and sport shooters while doing nothing to reduce crime or stop violent repeat offenders. It was the perfect rhetoric. Hopefully we see the same thing from the new Public Safety Minister, Frank Caputo, and I fully expect that we will, considering that the general theme of the Pierre-led Conservatives hasn't really changed that much. It's mostly just been Pierre's tone that has seen a slight shift. So that is all the information you need to know for when Parliament returns tomorrow as of the upload of this video. Just a reminder, King Charles is doing the throne speech, so if you're interested in that, you can watch it. The throne speech is kind of an interesting topic, but I will cover that and its contents in the next politics update video, which will come out very likely when Parliament goes on break and after the G7. So we'll talk about it next month. There is still one more thing to talk about, and that is Alberta. There have been a few polls recently talking about Alberta separation. Now, this is a very complex topic, and I know a lot of people that watch my videos, especially the politics videos, want Alberta separation, and they think it's a big thing, but the reality is it's a lot more complicated, and it can't really be boiled down into something as simple as it's definitely going to happen. First off, I just want to compare two polls. One poll from Angus Reid has 36% of Albertans wanting separation from Canada, and another poll from Kolosowski Strategies, who actually did very well in the election, had as high as 45%. So somewhere between 35 and 45% is, I think, a fair number to guess how many people are going to vote in the referendum, yes or no. There will be a referendum. Danielle Smith's government has changed the rules, or will be changing the rules, to allow more referendums in Alberta. This was partially done probably to appease the people that want separation, because a significant portion of the UCP voters, 65% according to Angus Reid, want separation. And as well, she also wants more referendums on things to do with natural resources and private property and things like that. So the rules will change. And from what I saw a few weeks ago, the signing list to get a referendum going was almost at the level it needed to get an official referendum on the ballot. So there will be a Alberta referendum, in my opinion. However, I don't think it's going to win. And I want to echo something that Blanchette said in a press conference a few weeks ago. He was speaking about Alberta separation and Quebec separation and comparing them, because he was asked a question about it. He said Alberta separation would be totally possible if they had more than just politics to drive the separation. And he makes a point. In Quebec, the Separatist Party is currently polling between 30 and 35%, and they're likely to win a majority government. Of course, that can still change. We're still a year out from the election there, but they very likely are going to win a majority government. However, when you look at Alberta, there is no Separatist Party, and almost all of the Separatists are part of the UCP. That presents a major challenge because Danielle Smith has said she is not in favor of separation. And the reason that you don't have that party that is pushing for separation is because most of the reason for separation that is cited by people has to do with the government in Ottawa, not a cultural driving factor. Now, I will say the cultural divide between Ottawa and Alberta is very different, but it's not historically that different. It's just grown in the last century or so. Whereas Quebec has always been, from the very minute that they existed, has always been culturally different, which gives them the ability to rally up more support behind the idea of an independent Quebec. So while there will be a referendum, I don't think the referendum is going to get more than 40% yes for leave. However, having the referendum could result in Alberta getting some kickbacks from Ottawa. Ottawa, depending on the polling, might be scared enough to say, all right, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, we'll give you this. Kind of like what Quebec had after the referendum in the 90s. Quebec got a whole bunch of special perks for being a province, and I could see Alberta having the same thing. Now, there is a lot around this, and we have no idea how this is actually going to unfold with any campaigns for it. So we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. This referendum, by the way, would not be about until, I think, sometime in late 2026. It might even be 2027. I don't know the schedule of the referendums, but it's not going to be for a while longer. So that is it for the May politics update. Like I said at the beginning of the video, there were, of course, other news stories that I couldn't get to, but this is just a recap of some of the major talking points that have happened in the last month. There will be another politics update video next month. It will cover the parliamentary session, what happened, the throne speech, and all that, and also the G7, and whatever other major news stories appear from it. But that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.